Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again. It's a little bit after 5 p.m. Pacific time, which can only mean one thing. It's time for another episode of The Yard. The Yard is a production of Commissary Club. Commissary Club is the first social network for 70 million Americans who have a criminal record. My name is Richard Bronson. I'm the founder and CEO of Commissary Club, as well as 70 Million Jobs, which is the national employment platform for folks with records. As usual, tonight I am joined by my good friends and teammates. Number one, Seth Sundberg, ex-NBA LA Lakers center. Seth, how are you tonight?
Richard, what's going on, man? It's good to talk with you, and I got to tell you, man, that's fastly becoming the fastest, the joy of my week for sure. That intro.
Okay, well, let's see how you feel as we get into it. But so far, so good. And of course, we are also joined by our friend, the rap artist, and incidentally, we were listening to his track just now. It's called HOPE for Hope, and it features the fabulous Ms. Felicia Horowitz, as well as Lovell. And of course, I am talking about rap artist and entrepreneur to the stars, Divine. Hey, D, how are you, sir?
Peace, Richard. Peace, Richard. Peace, Richard. Great to be here, man. Thank you, bro.
As always, it's wonderful to have you. We're also joined by the woman behind the scenes who sort of makes things happen. Her name is Adrienne Hatter. Seth, Divine, and I all have a record. We've all done time. Adrienne, much to the pride of her family, has never done time. But, of course, the night is young. Before we get started, I just want to share a couple of housekeeping items for you, and then we'll introduce our incredible guest. On the Yard, like on Commissary Club, our goal is to connect people. And in connecting people, we believe they can become available to one another, to help each other, to serve as role models, sometimes even to inspire one another. And very much we want to have people see people who have records, not necessarily for the crime they committed or maybe didn't commit, but rather for their undeniable humanity. That's how we should be seeing one another. So we want you to experience as much as possible what it's like to be incarcerated. That's our goal tonight. We think that what's necessary in order to make the world a more equitable place. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking you out to the Yard. The Yard is the place in any prison or jail where they bring people out, get a little fresh air, maybe a little sun, and that enables people to connect, to share, to laugh a little bit, to yell at each other, definitely to argue, and sometimes to share some sadness and even come close to crying. Now, crying is a dangerous thing to do on the Yard because it's a sign of weakness, and weakness in prison is something you want to avoid at all costs. But we would like to ask everybody, if and when you have comments or questions and we bring you up, which we will be doing later on, please stay on topic as it relates to specifically the experience of being in prison. Now, I understand the hows and whys people ended up in prison. What happened before they went to prison is important. And certainly it's very important what they do when they get out. But for the sake of this evening, we ask that you confine your questions or comments to specifically the in-prison experience. Raise your hand. We're not going to take questions right away because we got a bunch for our guests, but we will be later on. Now, what we do every time we've been doing the yard, this is, I think, our 17th episode. It's an exercise that I'm going to ask you just sort of to play along with and trust me here. First of all, I'm going to ask that everybody who's here, all of our co-hosts, all of our guests, or I guess our one guest and everybody else here, is first of all, please just take a deep breath and let it out slowly. Now, next, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. It's been a long day. Just close your eyes. Let your mind wander for a little bit. Let a little air into your brain. Now, sometimes legal problems, enter into our lives very quickly, and they devastate our lives like a tsunami. Other times, they take longer to unfold, and you sort of watch them as they slowly derail your carefully planned life. Let me give you an example. Some people here, no doubt, own their own business. Maybe it's a big one, maybe it's not a big one. It doesn't really matter. But it's a business that's been giving you and your family a very nice lifestyle. And in fact, life is good. And you're smart enough to acknowledge that every day. Things are going pretty good. You're also a person who's into food. You're a foodie. There's nothing you like better than taking your family, your friends out to the latest hot restaurant. And when the bill comes, inevitably you're the one who grabs it because, well, life has been good. Now, every quarter, as a business person, you're meeting with your accountant, and you go over your business and all over your personal finances. And you provide your accountant all the business receipts because you want to make sure that you're going to write off as many of the business expenses as you possibly can. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, as you put these receipts together, well, naturally, you're going to throw in a few of those personal dinners that you popped for. Maybe you'll throw in the family trip. Now you're characterizing it as a business trip. Now, nothing wrong here. It's not a serious thing. I mean, everybody does that, right? Your accountant even once said to you, one for them, meaning the IRS, one for you. But this year, something odd happened that hadn't happened before. This year, you received an unexpected letter from the IRS. And it seems that as part of their routine monitoring, they came upon your account and they have some questions regarding some of your business expenses. This year, for the first time, congratulations, you're being audited. Now, not only are they interested in your business expenses, but they're also looking at that building that you acquired earlier in the year. And they're specifically looking at your bank loan application. Now, you never thought anyone would ever be looking at that. You never thought it would be a problem. You fudged some of the numbers, but, you're fudging numbers. Fudging, that doesn't sound like such a bad thing. Well, apparently the IRS agent thinks otherwise. And because of that, your life's never going to be the same again. Now, let's jump ahead a couple of years. And you find yourself waking up from your sleep. And you look around and you notice, of course, that you're lying in a cot. And in front of the cot, you can see that there are bars on the door. And you turn to the left and you notice that your head is maybe 6 inches away from a stainless steel toilet. That's what you've been sleeping next to. And that toilet is attached to your sink. And on the other side of you, there's someone else who's also just waking up, except this person, well, he's coughing and he's wheezing for air. And you realize right then and there that you've been breathing the same air as somebody who's contracted the coronavirus. And you remember, and it all comes flooding back to you, where you are. You're in prison, and you're in prison for tax fraud, and you're going to be there for another 3 years. Now, once a day, they let you out onto the yard. They let you out onto this big open space, and there, if you want, you can toss around a football, you can go to the weight pile and lift some weights, Or you can do what you normally do, which is just to find your friends and just kick it with them the way friends do anywhere. These moments are incredibly special for you because for just these few moments, you're out on the yard. You're no longer just a number. You're no longer just an animal. But once again, you can make believe that you're a human being again. The same human being you were before your life spiraled out of control. So I'm going to take you out into the yard now, and I'm going to introduce you to somebody you should meet. But please first open your eyes, and then say hello to somebody we're very excited that has joined us. His name is Freeway Ricky Ross. Now, let me just tell you about this guy. Lots of people refer to themselves as OG, and lots of people talk about their accomplishments back in the day. But Rick Ross has always let his accomplishments, both good and bad, do the talking. Back in the 80s, and this is according to government sources, Rick was moving metric tons of cocaine. He was the biggest seller in Los Angeles, plus he was wholesaling the entire country. In today's terms, he was running a $3 billion business employing thousands of people. He didn't know it back then, but some of his buys were coming through the CIA, believe it or not, as part of their infamous Contragate scandal. It's an incredible story. In 1996, he was arrested. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Ricky went to prison where not only did he teach himself to read, he also taught himself the law. And through his study of the law, he discovered a loophole, and this loophole reduced his life sentence to 20 years, not life. He got out in 2009, and since then, he's been a pretty busy guy. He's written 2 books. He sued rapper Rick Ross for stealing his name. He launched a cannabis company called LA Kingpins, and now he speaks extensively to young people about how to avoid mistakes that he's made in the past. And for those of you who are wondering where the Freeway part his name came from, Rick was making so much money, he needed to put it somewhere, so he began buying up property along the 110 highway in LA, hence Freeway Rick Ross. Ricky, we are so proud to have you join us on the yard. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Did I basically get that story right about your life?
You were pretty good. I must admit. I was like, how did I know all this?
We've been talking about you. That's how. We've been asking around. Now, your reputation precedes you, needless to say. And that's really the first question that I wanted to ask you, if I may. You had as big a rep as anybody when you came to prison. You had loads of press. Everybody knew you. You were selling to the Crips. You were selling to the Bloods. When you got to prison, did your rep hurt you or help you when you first got there?
Well, with the inmates, it helped me. Even though there was a few guys that would be jealous. I guess, when you sell drugs, you kind of sell drugs for a reputation. So, everybody wants to be the big man on the block. So, with a few of the guys inside the prison, they would get mad because some of their young homies would come to me for information, how to do this, how to do that. But for the most part, my reputation helped me. And then there was a few guards that didn't like it. But then there was a few guards who really loved me, who did favors for me. Things like, because I was conducting business inside a prison, which is against the rules. But I'd already said that if I don't conduct business when I get out of jail, I'll be back in the same position I was in when I went, or even worse. So I better start making some moves while I was in prison. So I got in a lot of trouble. I would lose my telephone, my mail, where I couldn't receive letters or mail from the outside or phone calls. And there was a few guards who worked in the mail room that would allow my mail to still come through. So it helped. It hurt, but for the most part, it was all good.
Were you ever in a position where somebody was sort of looking to make a reputation for themselves by, getting in your face and calling you out?
No, absolutely not. That would have caused a riot.
Wow, what do you mean? How would that have happened?
Well, from my neighborhood, even though I never gangbanged, the gang still claim me as being theirs. And I consider that a good thing, not necessarily a negative thing. But I'm from my neighborhood is Hoover Crips, and they're one of the biggest gangs inside the prison, and don't many people want to mess with them.
That's amazing. And I assume there were lots of guys from the gang who were in prison when you got there, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Was there gang problems with other gangs that were going on there? I mean, that's sort of the way, the TV and movies depict that environment.
They do have issues, but the way the politics work now, it's kind of organized in a sense, because if a guy from a different gang has an issue with a guy from a different gang, then they have to go to the top guys and get permission to move on them. They just can't go and do something. Now, every now and then some random stuff happens, where guys are on the basketball court or football field or the weight pile, and they get into an argument and they start fighting. Then that's one thing that's not necessarily going to cause retaliation. But if somebody does something, like say for instance, if they steal something from you, and you're supposed to go to the shot callers and talk it over with them. So it's kind of they try to keep the rival gangs from getting into it with each other, because that could cause a riot, and nobody wants to riot.
Yeah, for sure, man. And Rick, what's happening, man? It's Seth. It's great to talk with you. We met a few years back and at a 5 Ventures event, and your story blew me away then too, man. I wanted to ask you kind of about the transition from life, as a big time dope man to inside. Like, what was the beginning of that? From the first time you got in to the first few weeks. I mean, was that a shock and awe thing? Was it something you expected? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. The first day is the worst day of your life. It seems like that day never ends. It runs and runs and runs and runs, and you're pacing, hoping that maybe you'll get a bail, or maybe they'll make a mistake and let you out. So that day is the worst day, and each day gets a little easier to do. But for myself, after I had got readjusted, I wanted to figure out how could I redo myself. How could I change myself from what I was when I came in.
Yeah, Rick, Divine here, man. It's an honor to have peace, brother, peace, King. Yo, it's an honor to have you here, man. And I'm curious, man. Like, I spent a decade incarcerated in federal prison, nowhere near a life sentence. You're going into prison with a life sentence. I could imagine you might have felt hopeless, but for some reason, you didn't reserve to that. You decided to go into the law library. If Rich is accurate, you learn how to read while in prison. You went to the law library. On top of that, you found a loophole. What was it like navigating that process while in prison, from even learning how to read to entering the law library, finding a loophole, and then figuring out how to get that appeal out, and eventually you won it?
Well, one of the things, Divine, that I got to say about myself that I think is one of my strong points is that my ability to listen to others, and I'm glad that I do that. I mean, that has helped me in just about every venture that I went into, and it also helped me when I went to prison. I had a lawyer, a pretty well paid lawyer when I went to prison, one of the top guys out of California. And I felt comfortable with him representing me. Before fortunate enough for me that while I was there, I started asking the older guys who were there who had been doing law for a while about my case, asking for assistance. And one of them brought to my attention is that I shouldn't be dependent on my lawyer as much as I was, that I should be taking my case into my own hands. And they made a kind of a statement. I'll try to redo what he told me the best that I can. And he asked me, did my lawyer have other clients? And I said, of course. And asked me, was they getting the same type of representation that I'm getting? And I said, I only hope that he would be. And then he asked me, does he have kids? And I said, of course he has kids. And he asked me, was he worried about his kids? And I said, of course he's worried about his kids. He said, do he have a wife? And I said, oh, absolutely, he has a wife, and he's worried about his wife. So he said, do you think that he puts your case in front of all those people? And when I thought about it, I had to say no.
Wow.
Great advice.
He asked me, did I think that I should be out of jail more than he thought about his other clients, his kids, his wife? And I said, absolutely. And he said that if you feel like that, you better put the time in. If you don't do it, nobody else will.
Ricky, I worked at, I don't know if you saw the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. I was a partner at that firm, and the guy who ran it, who was played by Leonardo DiCaprio, of course, he once said to me, and I'll never ever forget it, and I've repeated it to a lot of people, he said, there are no such thing as good lawyers. There's only good clients. And that's just like exactly what you were saying. You got to be on them, and the problem is typically you're dealing with lawyers at your weakest moment, and that's the time where you really got to be strong because, like you say, nobody's going to care about you like you do yourself.
Yeah, well, you know what? And since you mentioned that, you have my lawyer was able to get all of my friends out of prison. And what I learned while I was there was one of the reasons he was able to do that is because I was on the streets. So when I was on the streets, I did everything that it could to keep them out of prison. But when the shoe was on the other foot, nobody put forth that type of effort for me that I put forth for my guy.
Wow, not surprising.
Yeah, not at all. We've talked about that. We're going to get to that because that's something I know how Divine, what he experienced, it broke my heart. How people treated me. But let's just back up a little bit. You went into prison and you didn't know how to read. Is that true, what I read?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's sort of interesting to me that you were running this huge business and, you were watching, money and you were watching schedules and you were dealing with personnel and everything else. I got to believe it was sort of challenging. What made you go into prison and, at that point you said, something, this is something I got to address or I have the time now to do it, or what was your motivation then?
Say that again one more time, the last part.
I'm wondering why you came to prison and you decided I'm going to learn how to read. It was something that apparently you were not, motivated to do before, but once you got to prison, you were.
You hit the nail right on the head. What I found out when I got to prison was that I had never really wanted to read because I couldn't comprehend reading with money. When I got to prison, my freedom was on the line. It meant that if I didn't learn how to read, that I wouldn't be able to function inside of a law library, and I needed to be able to function inside of the law library in order to get home because guys had explained to me that the only way was out of prison was through the law library.
Did you really believe that you were going to be, serving a lifetime sentence, or was that just so unbelievable to you, you figured it can't play out that way?
Some days I felt that I may be in there for the rest of my life, and what I did is I came to grips with the fact that it was possible that I could be in prison for the rest of my life, because when you're dealing with the feds, only 1% of the people who get a life sentence or get convicted with the feds get a reversal. So I knew my chances of winning was slim to none. So I had accepted that was a possibility, but then I also felt that if it had to be, that I would petition the world for my release. And that's when I started to study and read as much as I could to make myself as smart as I could get.
Well, it sounds like you were pretty smart before.
But I can tell you, I was nothing like I am today.
Okay, good. We got you at the right time then. What was the first book you read?
The first book I ever read from cover to cover was Malcolm X, autobiography by Alex Haley. And when I read that book, I saw myself. When I read books, I always put myself in the book. I pick out the character that closely resembles myself. I try to do that every book that I read. And when I read the book, I saw me having similarities to Malcolm X. And then I looked at it and I said, well, in some ways, you're ahead of Malcolm X. Because before Malcolm X had met Elijah Muhammad, he had never been in a newspaper. He had absolutely no notoriety. He couldn't read. And he was a petty thief. And a criminal. Let me say, maybe not thief. I don't remember if he was specialized in thievery, but he was a petty criminal. So when I looked at it, I was like, wow, you could be bigger than Malcolm X.
You could be bigger than Malcolm X. So, I mean, from what point of view? I mean, did you aspire to, be this great person, or did you have a master plan, or other than, you were pretty successful before?
I've always wanted to be great. I've never wanted to be mediocre. I think mediocrity is, I don't know the correct word to use, but in my mind,
mediocre.
A mediocre is
yeah.
That
just mediocre.
I despise it. I don't think that nobody should just be mediocrity. I think that you should aspire to be all that you can be in whatever field that you plan on going into.
So where did you see yourself becoming great? Was it to return to be a greater drug dealer, or did you have another plan?
Oh, no. I never wanted to be a drug dealer. I kind of fell into selling drugs. Malcolm X said, Planet Rock fell on him. Well, that's kind of what happened with me with cocaine. I was, a young man, growing up in South Central. And one day I was sitting on my porch with absolutely nothing to do, no money. I was going in life. I'd just been told that I wasn't going to college to play tennis. So I'd hung up my tennis rackets, and I didn't know what my next move was when one of my friends called me, and he introduced me to cocaine. And I also saw a movie called Superfly that influenced me. And I said, well, wow, maybe this is going to be how I become Superfly through this first encounter. But I never wanted to be a drug dealer. I never thought being a drug dealer was cool. But I did enjoy having the money and the power and to be able to support my family and friends the way that drugs gave me. What I did when I was in prison after I read Malcolm X's book, I saw an advantage that I had over Malcolm X. No disrespect to religion, but he taught religion. And what I could do is I could teach economics. A lot of people don't understand, but when I was selling drugs in the 80s, one of my callings was that I made a lot of people millionaires. I made all of my friends that would listen and that would pay attention, they all became millionaires. And I said, wow, if you could do that with drugs, one of the hardest businesses in the world, what's going to happen when you start teaching them how to do legal business? the same way. And that's what I set out to do.
Wow, that's incredible. When you got to prison, what was, everybody talks about that when they first walk in, and that reality hits them. But I always love to hear, when you got there, everybody tries to prepare for it, and they, you learn as much as you can, but inevitably nothing can prepare you for prison. When you got to prison, what was the thing that surprised you most? What was the most unexpected thing that you saw?
The boredom. Being sit in a little room and being told that for 23 hours a day you have to lay on a bunk and do absolutely nothing. I mean, that for me, I'm probably what they would call a busybody. I never want to stop moving, and to have to sit on a bunk all day long drove me up the wall. I couldn't wait until the time they made me a trustee where I could at least get out and sweep floors and mop and clean showers and clean toilets. Was like, that was almost like selling drugs to me at that time. I was like, wow, paradise.
Did you find it, you were so, you were making so much money, and I'm sure you were leading an incredible life, where you needed nothing, you had it all, it was all at your fingertips, plus you had people around you, I'm sure, who would do anything that, you would just snap your fingers and you'd get what you needed. And now you go into prison. How hard an adjustment, was it for you to sort of say, all right, here I am, and I got to get used to this? Was it hard, or did you sort of fall into it?
Talk about the material things. It wasn't that hard for material things. I don't really care about the shoes, the clothes, the things that a lot of people in prison care about. Those things really didn't bother me because I didn't have those things on the street. I didn't eat a lot of different foods, so I was a pretty simple guy, just with a lot of money, So that part didn't really bother me about being in prison. Staying in a little bitty thin mattress. A mattress was probably about 3 inches thick. It was a little uncomfortable, but it didn't really shake me to the core. The thing that really bothered me was that I wasn't able to have value to others. I couldn't add value to my family no more. I couldn't add value to my girlfriend, to my kids. That's what really irked me more than, not being able to something like that there.
Hey, D, you had a question?
Yeah, Rick. That's one thing that I find remarkable about you, and I often tell a lot of people this because I see it from the outside, looking in. Is that I find you to be very humble, and did you carry that same humility throughout your sentence, and if you did, how was that perceived? Because sometimes being humble could be looked at as weakness, and sometimes it could be looked at as strength. How did that play out for you in prison?
Well, some people do use it as weakness. When I was in prison, I ran a store. So, people would come in and get stuff from me and not pay me sometimes. And, I'd have to chalk it up to the game. But my stores did so well that, I could chalk up a couple $100 every now and then. That was part of doing business. But, yes, being humble has always been one of my strong points, because what I found out is that when you're humble, people like you. People don't really like people that's boastful and always outshining them, always. And people like people who are like themselves. So I try to stay humble as much as I can.
So let me get this straight.
I do have an ego, though.
I think we all do.
You had to.
But I had.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said I have to tame it. I have to keep it under control.
Right.
and not let people see it.
Right.
It's just amazing, though, to me, that you had this huge business, and, I just can only imagine how much cash was coming in, and the cash machines that you had to use to count the bills, and, every day there were millions of dollars coming in, and yet you used the word humble in the same sentence. And then you go to prison where you're sort of forced to be humble, but for you, of course, it wasn't that big of an adjustment, I guess, because that's the way you led your life, right?
Absolutely. On the basketball court and the football field is when I was in prison, where they would mostly see my ego come out. When I get on the basketball court, I'm trying to stop everybody from scoring points that ain't on my team, and I'm trying to score as many points and help my partner score as many points as we can. So, but other than that, I would try to keep it under wraps.
Huh. That's pretty amazing. You mentioned. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, Richard. I just wanted to ask, man. So let's talk a little bit about basketball in prison, since you brought it up. Did you play point or what?
I played point guard.
Yeah, I bet you'd be a great point guard, man. I'd love to.
Championship. I won one championship.
That's a big deal inside too, man, for sure.
For me, that was like winning the NBA Finals.
Right?
I had never won a championship in basketball nowhere. Even on the street. So to win the championship in the prison for me was a big deal.
Yeah, man, getting the chip is a big deal, especially inside. You get bragging rights for sure. Man, I'll tell you this, and I'm sure it was the same for you, and you can talk more about it too. But I've never seen you talk about before about things jumping off kind of sporadically, right, versus something that's like planned and organized. But I think that that basketball court was like you talk about egos getting out there and all that, and everybody's hooping, and I got into a pattern where it was just like as soon as everybody started jawing and the ball goes on the court and everybody starts knuckling, I'm like, okay, time to go hit the weight pile. Was it like that where you were at too?
Yeah, pretty much. The only two times I almost got it. One time I was guarding somebody and I hit him in the mouth with an elbow on an accident, total accident. I apologize. But before I hit, he had already ran up on me and the benches had cleared. But we were able to calm it down. I told him, no, that's my boy. And the guy who I hit him out was my boy too. So, it's like, no, that's my boy, man. We good.
Yeah.
So I was able to calm it down. A lot of times, I found out it takes a lot of strength to calm those situations down. Because, hot heads, they be ready to go. And it takes somebody with a cool head who don't mind people saying that you were soft or you were weak to say, you know what? No, we ain't gonna do this.
Let me just reset the room quickly, if I may. We are here with the legendary Freeway Ricky Ross, the baddest, biggest drug dealer in the 80s. Who was sentenced to a life term, figured out a way to get around that through a loophole in the law, which we're going to get into, taught himself the law while he was there, and we're just talking about what life is in prison, what his life was in prison. And I'm joined by Seth and Divine. We're all part of the Commissary Club team, along with Adrian. If you've got a question or want to join the conversation, now would be a good time to please raise your hand. And join us up here. Once again, we ask that your questions really focus not on whatever you're doing, as hard as that may be, to avoid, but we're interested in talking about the experience in prison, and it might be your experience in prison, in which case we are very, very interested. So let me let this gentleman up here. please raise your hand and let us know if you, and please stay on. Right. Thank you, Lawrence. All right. So let's hear from you, Lawrence. How are you, sir? And what's on your mind? Unmute yourself, Lawrence.
Hello. Hey. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me. It's good to see all you guys again. Divine, Seth, Adrian.
Peace, brother.
You too, my man.
Yeah. So my name is.
Okay.
You lost him?
We'll never know his name, much less his question, but I guess he'll come back. Ricky, you were talking about.
Here he is, Rich.
Lawrence, you're back, Lawrence. All right, try that again.
Yeah, let's try it again. My name is Lawrence, and so it's very interesting to see Mr. Ross up here. I actually was in Lompoc, California, when it was a high security with Rick Ross. I was in F Block with Mac Dre, Big Dun, their cousin Andre Hicks, and I believe Rick was in Murder Block and M Block on the other side. And I want I want very simply to verify everything Rick just said about himself. And I used to make beats for Mac Dre and them, and sometimes Rick would come up in the music room and listen and check Mac Dre out. But Rick, so before Rick hit the yard, it was almost like Kim Kardashian coming to the Met Ball. Everybody knew he was coming. No, for real. I'm telling you, real rap.
What were you wearing, Ricky? That's what I want to know.
Hey, everybody knew he was coming, and like he said, his bros from the Hoover Crips, a lot of them were in C Block, and a lot of them were in Murder Block too, and they rolled out the red carpet for him. He's being very humble, and I remember the way Rick looked. Rick came there, he had his beard. At the time, he had a kind of a high top, and it looked like it was almost turning into dreads. And but the way he's talking right now, literally the way he is talking right now, is literally the way that he talked. And back then, Lompoc was a high security prison. There was people he's being very humble. People was getting killed all the time in there. In '97, I don't know if Rick was there, but in '97, a cop got murdered. Right? And
I was there. I got murdered. I was
there for that, right, Rick?
Yep.
Yeah. And a cop got murdered by this really humble brother that nobody ever thought would do anything. But me and Rick walked around the yard one time, and I don't know if you remember, Rick, but they used to call me Seattle Slim in there, and I made all the beats and all that stuff.
Yeah, I remember you. I remember you. What's up, man?
Wow. A grand reunion. A grand reunion.
I told you I was going to sign you. Man. Down.
Right.
This is great.
You did tell me that.
This is crazy.
But listen, you guys. Here's what I want to tell you. This guy is not throwing no fanfare, man. This dude, the way he's talking right now, and it worked for him because his humility was actually his superpower. It was his superpower because he's right. Most cats come in there, woo, 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 and I'm from this, that. But Rick didn't have anything to prove.
Right.
He didn't have nothing to prove, so everybody knew who he was. They knew he was the weight god, right? But was
the weight god. I love it. The weight god.
Everybody knew he was. He was the god, right? So what was really cool, and I think what had Rick come through there unscathed, because a lot of times, especially back in the mid '90s, cats didn't care who they brought the business to. But when Rick just said, I was humble, and that's why people liked me. There was people in there that would have tried Rick if he would have came in there acting like he was some type of big bad dude.
Right.
But Rick was just gliding. He was just up in there just gliding, man. He was just like gliding. He didn't make a big deal. Nothing was a big deal to him. So like when he was talking about his store, I bought some stuff from his store up in there. He was an entrepreneur too.
You do 2 for 1?
This is crazy. 2 for 1, Rick. 2 for 1.
No, 2 for 3.
I always paid him. You feel me? But there was some things. Some people would say stuff, and somebody would do stuff, and Rick would have to tell people to calm down.
This is crazy.
Rick would have to tell people like, nah, don't worry about it, no way. Rick just spoke, and Rick could have literally look. This sounds like cinema. But Rick literally could have just spoke a word.
Put the dogs on him. He could have put the dogs on him.
An army army of gangbangers would have peeled the skin off of anybody.
Right.
So Rick is really being, you know, he's still the same dude. I mean, this was what, 20-something years ago, right, Rick? He's still the same.
Yeah, it's been like 20 years, man.
It's been 20-something years.
Amazing.
He's still the same dude as he was at Lompoc, California, all those years ago. Just hearing him talk, I'm like, yo, I remember when
you remember Chubb? Hey, you remember Chubb?
Yeah, man. Come on.
Yeah, Chubb got killed right after he got out.
Yep, I heard that.
Hey, Lawrence.
I heard that, bro.
Lawrence, I think this speaks to what I was saying, like how I perceive him as being so humble. It's part of who he is, right? It's hardwired.
Yeah. He's not over here like polished, like, okay, I'm out now, and I'm gonna, you know, I got out in 2009, and now I'm gonna remake my image. I swear to God, you guys, his tone that he's talking with right now, he was that way when we were walking around killers. And don't get it twisted, man. There was people in there getting their throats cut, getting stabbed up in that movie theater, getting their heads brought to them regularly, and it was dangerous because sometimes the guards would facilitate. Right? So it was really a kill zone up in there, but Rick was just, you know, he would help people out too. It wasn't always about the money. So sometimes Rick would like somebody was getting out and Rick would send word to the street to help somebody out there. You know what I mean? And it was you know, he's I'm saying he's a real deal.
I use my resources for others. If I can't use it, let somebody else use it.
Yeah, Rick is the real deal. So I'm glad Richard and Seth and Adrienne and Divine that you guys decided to bring this brother up because I was rooting for Rick to get his name back. I'm like, how this dude is gonna take his name and act like he's something this dude to live it? I was rooting for Rick to win that case, man.
Hey Slim, what we'd like to do is, can you make sure you connect with one of us, you know, at the end here? Because maybe we could get you up into the yard so you could have your own gig up here and we could talk further. Because you got a great memory, if nothing else.
He did music for all the guys in Lompoc. He kept a lot of guys up in that music studio.
Yeah. Try to keep it positive. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, sometimes, you know, every now and again we had to lay it down and get dirty, but for the most part, you know, I just try to keep it cracking. Were you there, Rick, when that riot happened when Mac Dre was on the stage?
No, I wasn't there then.
That was before.
You talking about when Yo-Yo came?
Yeah, when Yo-Yo came.
No, I wasn't there then.
This is wild, man. This is what the Commissary Club's all about, man.
Tore the whole Lompoc up for days. There was a riot for days, you know, between the Crips and the Bloods. But yeah, Rick, I just want to tell you, man, respect, love. I'm glad you're out here maintaining. If anybody deserves to be out, it's you, man. It's you. And my respect for you is just you just chill. You know, you're a powerful dude. You're a powerful thinker. You know how to put ones and twos together and all that. But at the same time, you don't wear that on your sleeve. You don't try to bully nobody with it. You never have. You know what I mean? You never have. And that's what makes it.
But you know, Slim, I don't think what I do makes me no better than nobody else. I just found a technique.
Hey, Rick, 1 second. Hey, Marcel, I think it may be you, brother. Could you please put your thing on mute? There you go. Thank you so much. Speaking of Marcel, hey, Slim, hang out here. You know, join us for a while.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. We want to get Marcel. Hey, Marcel, please unmute yourself. Say hello. What's on your mind?
Hi, how you guys doing? How you doing, Ricky? I'm familiar with your story because, like, you know, it's pretty famous. You know, like everybody knows. But there's also, like, I just want to ask a question. There's also, like, people who are, like, regular inmates who did time, and their stories, like, interesting, and, you know, they're just not as famous as you or, like, you know, well-known.
Did you do time, Marcel? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I actually did. I actually went to the feds, too, from the age 17 to 25.
Okay. Can I comment on that, Marcel, what you just said?
I went to the feds for weapon charges. When I was young, I got charged for trafficking weapons. At the age of 17, they charged me as adult. They took me from DSS custody, then tried to armed career criminal me, but they couldn't. So I basically got lucky and ended up getting less than I was supposed to get because of my youth, my age. I got
thank God for that. Marcel, what's your question for Ricky?
So my question for Ricky is, like, when there's a person who's just, like I said, not as famous as him, but did time, how do they leverage that their story when they come out? Like, how do they use that to benefit themselves? Like, how did you do? Like, what would you do? Like, what advice would you give to them?
The first thing I did, I read over 300 books about business. I read the Wall Street Journal every day. I read LA Times every day, USA every day. I studied. I read over 14 books on marketing. So when you say famous, I wanted to become famous. I wanted to use my notoriety. Remember, I told you in the beginning that I read Malcolm X's book, and I saw that I had advantage over Malcolm X. So I deliberately started to put myself in a position to do the things that I'm able to do right now. So I would tell you, being somebody else that got out, is that you have to find ways in order to use your background. I mean, you could go out and talk to kids about guns. You know, the danger of guns, the danger of selling guns, the danger of being involved with guns, and put yourself in a similar position.
All right, that's some good advice. Norman, thank you for joining us here tonight. How you doing? What are you thinking? Unmute yourself, brother.
I'm good. I'm just here to support my man, my best friend on the planet for 100 years, Shawty, Freeway, Rick Ross, and just, basically say that he's probably one of the people who has been one of the major influences and inspirations in my life, just from his sheer desire and determination to be successful at whatever endeavor it is that he participates in.
Hey, Norman, me and Norman met in 11th grade. He was going to Hollywood, I was going to Dorsey, and we've been together ever since. I knew his mom. He knew my mom. His mom used to make some tremendous cookies for me every time. Then I would come by. She said, "I got them cookies for you." First time I ever ate cookies with almonds and walnuts and stuff like that in them was at Norman's mom's house. So that's my boy. We played tennis together at Dorsey High School.
You're a good tennis player, huh, Ricky?
And he couldn't beat me either.
Ricky, tennis? You play tennis, Ricky?
Yeah, I played tennis.
That might tarnish your image, man. Come on.
Did you play while you were down?
I taught tennis. That was my hustle inside the pen.
Are you serious?
$20 an hour inside the penitentiary.
Wow. Was that 20 mackerels? What was the money there? Was it 20 mackerels?
Stamps.
Okay, stamps, okay.
Tuna,
Yeah, 20 tunas.
The money just changed. Whatever they take away.
Right.
That's what they
Right.
Cigarettes.
It's always fluctuating.
Yes. But yeah, I taught inside the pen.
Yeah, hey, Kyle, brother, could you mute yourself, please? And could everybody please mute yourself when you come up? Divine asked about mackerel, and I remember when I came to prison, the smell of canned mackerel, it just knocked me on my ass. And I asked, "What is that smell?" And they said, "It's mackerel." I go, "What the fuck is mackerel?" And they said, "Well, the guys who are on the weight pile eat mackerel because it's high in protein, and you're going to learn this is the unit of currency here. You don't use money, you don't use cigarettes, but if you need something done, it's all done through mackerel. You want to get a haircut, it's 2 mac. You want somebody who's going to make your bed, it's 2 mac, whatever." What was the unit of currency back in your day?
Oh, mine, it changed. We use stamps, we use cigarettes. I mean, you would see people walking around with cigarettes that were so old. I mean, when I got to Lompoc, they gave me, first time I bought a pack of cigarettes, because that's what you trade with. and I bought a carton of cigarettes, and it had tape on it, and the packs was falling loose, but you still able to trade it. So cigarette stamps, tuna, chicken, I mean, whatever it was that people bought became the if they would take stamps off the compound, they would go to tuna. It was cigarettes. They took cigarettes off the compound, then it would go to something else. So it transferred, and then from prison to prison, it also transferred too.
Yeah, there's like a little micro economy that exists. Hey, Kyle, how are you?
Exchange.
Prison forex, the forex. Yeah. Hey, Kyle.
If you pack something in your bag, that they didn't have at another prison, well, the price might be 5 times as high as it was.
Yeah.
So, we used to do that as well. We would know what the other prisons didn't have from kites, and then we would take that to the other pen.
We got Kyle joining us right now. Hey, Kyle, how are you? What's on your mind?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Rick, it's an honor to meet you, and I've read a lot about you. I did.
Well, you gonna read a lot?
I went to prison.
Hey, you gonna read a lot?
Great. I went to prison from 20 to 43, and you said something. Well, you said a few things, and I just want to make a statement and have a question for you. And I don't want to take up too much time. My statement is, you've done a great job, even from your hustle in the streets all the way up until now, and even fighting with William Roberts. I've never acknowledged him as you, and just keep pushing, and hopefully one day he'll come to his senses and do what needs to be done. So my question is, and this is really to enlighten the audience. So now, I worked in the law library for years on end, and I watch guys fight their cases, fight the prison system, do everything else. How did you, reconcile your drive, but at the same time to help other men achieve their goals of ultimately freedom, but also financial freedom?
You know what? In the middle of that, you had kind of broke up. You were saying, how did I? And then you broke up. I couldn't understand what you said.
Okay, I'm sorry. How did you, spending so much time in the law library, I've seen men literally lose themselves in the law books.
That was
How did you reconcile? Okay, so you know where I'm going with this.
Absolutely.
How did you reconcile using that time and energy, but also having energy to help other men achieve their goals, both legally and financially along the way? Because we most of us know who've been there. It takes an enormous amount of energy just to go through the law books. You have to literally learn a dead language, which is Latin, and then you have to apply it to your situation.
Well, first of all, I knew that was going to be my way out of prison. So I said that if I put that much into getting into prison, then I was going to put the same amount of time into getting out. So that's how I started myself. And what I would do is I started teaching others what the guys that taught me, how to shepherdize, how to go through a case and analyze which issues are related to your issues. Because, really in case law, what you want to do is find a case that's closely related to yours where the guy won. And, a lot of people don't really understand that. And I taught guys how to do that. I help guys get bills. I just shared my information.
So, Ricky, let me see if I just want to paint the scenario here. You're spending a lot of time in the library. You're spending a lot of time with these law books. Were you convinced that you would find something there that could help your case? And tell us about that moment, that aha moment, when you actually discovered, holy shit, this actually could get me out of prison right away. Did you have that moment?
I did. I was reading in my cell. Because what I would do is you can't take law books outside the law library, but what they allow you to do is make copies of the case. And I would do that at night, and while I was in my cell, which gave me something to do, it beats just staying in the bunk doing nothing, is that I would read case law. And one day, I was just there reading, and it just popped out, the words that I had been looking for. And I couldn't wait until they opened the doors so I could go get on the phone and tell my attorney. And when I did, he bust my bubble and told me it didn't apply to me because my case is state. And what he didn't really understand is that it wasn't about which state the case was in. It was more about intervening arrest was the most important thing that the judges were saying.
So he said he burst your bubble by saying what you thought was a out for you didn't apply, right? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
But was he wrong, or did that mean you went back to the law books and looked harder and found what did apply?
No, he was dead wrong, and then I found more.
He was wrong.
Yeah, and then I found more cases that backed up my case, and I just piled it on. And the judge agreed with my lawyer as well as the prosecutor. They all said that I was wrong, but the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said that I was correct. So it still took me about 4 years before I finally got some relief.
Wow.
That's amazing. You mentioned earlier, you were talking about being in prison, how hard it was for you. You weren't so concerned about the material things you were doing without. You mentioned shoes or the food or whatever. You were a simple guy, but not being available there for your loved ones, what hurt the most. Did you go through any specific, sort of moments, either bad news that you received or events that you knew you missed? Tell us about, we're joking about a lot of this, but I know a lot of this isn't funny, as it relates to your loved ones. What was the hardest thing about being away from them?
Well, the first thing for me is that I had promised my kids that I was going to be there for them, that I wasn't going back to prison, and I lied to them. So it took me a while to even face up to them that I would allow them to come and see me, or I would talk to them on the phone. It was really tough to do that the first time. For events, I didn't really care about the events that was taking place. But yes, I did lose quite a few loved ones while I was gone. But I would say that was about the gist of it is losing loved ones.
Yeah, it's. I just think back on some of the things I felt like I missed while I was in prison, and it just sort of breaks my heart. Well, you also mentioned, I was not living as large as you were, but I was doing very well, and I had my whole entourage, and I didn't ever want for anything, and I expected that these people were my friends and they'd be there for me through thick and thin. And, I found out the hard way that just wasn't even nearly true. Were the people that you were expecting who would be in your corner, did they, they deserted me? Did they desert you, Ricky?
They did. When I first fell, I was kind of mad about it. But then somebody told me who had already been in prison, what if somebody from prison would have called me? How would I have handled it? And I probably would have ran from them as well. So I kind of understood for some, but then on others who wasn't doing any criminal activity, I couldn't understand why they didn't look out. And then even the ones who were doing criminal activity, they never thought about sending me a few dollars or going by looking out for my mom or nothing like that there. So yeah, they pretty much deserted me as well. Usually the only business I got was my mom, and she would bring my kids down from time to time, and then one of my brothers would come maybe twice a year, 3 times a year. But other than that, those were the only visits I got. After you was in for a while, when you first fall, everybody comes because they don't believe you're going to stick. They don't think the case is going to stick, but after they know it's going to stick, people start to fall off rapidly.
And you don't feel angry about that?
No, not at all. Having gone through that made me the person that I am today. I'm used to people coming in and out of my life, and I'm perfectly fine with somebody if they want to stay, and I'm perfectly fine with you when you get ready to leave.
Did you meditate in prison? It sounds like you did.
I do a lot of thinking even right now. You know, I usually wake up about 5 in the morning, and you know, usually there's nobody there. And when I was in jail, I did the same thing. I woke up at 5. I get on the weight pile at 6 when the yard opened, and from 5 to 6, I would be maybe in the bed stretching and just thinking about, you know, the way I want to mold myself and my environment into becoming.
Hey, Lakidru, forgive me if I mispronounced your name, but thank you for joining us. What's on your mind tonight? You need to unmute yourself. Lakidru? Oh, there we go. Hi, how are you tonight? Okay. Well, we may never know. Jump in if your sound comes back. Oh, are you there? Lakidru?
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yes. Hi, how are you tonight?
I am great, thank you. Sorry about that. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to say real quickly, Mr. Ross, definitely love your story. Have read about it. I learned about who you were probably a couple years ago. And my father actually spent like 30 years of my life in and out of prison, which was fueled by a drug addiction. But to hear you say how much you wanted to be with your kids, but there was a level of shame there. And I always thought it was just because my dad didn't want to see me. I didn't think about all the emotions that he was dealing with. So to hear you say that, even as a 50-year-old woman, that means a lot to me, because there was a part of me that always wanted to know why he kept going back, why he didn't, I would go and see him, but it was like sometimes we wouldn't even have a conversation while I was there. And so to hear that, they were always a part of your thoughts, they were always a part of you, even in that situation, really means a lot to me. So I thank you for just coming out and just, sharing your story, encouraging others. And thank you guys for having me on the stage.
Yeah, thank you for that, too. And that just made me think about, really why I wrote my book, because I thought it was important that our young people have some type of reference to go by. I was just thinking when I was in prison, my mind, I'm always just thinking about crazy stuff, stuff that don't make sense to nobody else but myself. And I was like, wow, what if it would have been a book that I could have picked up and could have told me how my life was going to start and how it was going to end? How would I have made adjustments, basically dealing with that? And I felt that that I should write that book, since nobody else had did it, to literally give young people a bird's eye view of what the future would be if they became a drug kingpin.
So Ricky, that's a great lead-in. What advice, in retrospect, would you give yourself if you were talking to your, 18 or 19-year-old self? What would you be telling, young Ricky?
Well, first of all, read my book.
Buy your book.
Yeah, buy my book. Well, if I would have put the same type of energy that I put into selling drugs, and I would have saved as diligently as I did selling drugs, I could have worked at McDonald's and been rich. So what I did was nothing special, was nothing fancy. I just found a recipe and I worked it.
The woman who was Lakidru was just here, and she was talking about shame, and that now she understands and perhaps forgives her father, that he was not available and not there for her, and that, there was shame that he felt or perhaps still feels. Do you feel shame at all about looking back on things, particularly as it relates to your relationship with your kids?
Well, the way I deal with it is that I learn a lot from what I've been through. Not really shame, a little disappointment that I wasn't there for my kids. I only wonder what they would have been had I been here for them to mold them the way that I know that a person needs that molding and that caressing. But I don't really feel embarrassed because I didn't know. My mom didn't know how to raise a young man by herself. So when you're dealing with those things, then you have to come to grips with them. That sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, and if nobody teaches you, then you will be in the dark. And basically I was in the dark. I would never sell drugs and not count weed. I don't consider weed as a drug. I would never sell drugs to nobody again. For no amount,
do it over.
For no amount of money.
Okay, that's a lesson to be learned. Every week, Ricky, I take 2 minutes and I share something that's been bothering me for the week. I call it my rant. And this week I'm pretty pissed off, so I got to share it. I've talked about, this is our 17th episode of The Yard, and I've spoken a lot about our corrupt, racist bond and bail system. People are surprised, but just because someone's been arrested, that doesn't mean he or she is guilty. Far from it. And beyond that, the Constitution gives us the right to demand a jury trial if we are arrested. Theoretically, the way the law works is you are considered innocent until you're proven guilty. But what happens to those people who can't afford to make bail and as they await trial? Typically, they end up rotting away in jail, and that's what happens to them. But what happens when the court system grinds to a halt and courts aren't even hearing cases anymore? What happens when a pandemic, to get specific, what happens when a pandemic hits and courts are shut down for more than a year? Well, at that point, the constitutional rights of these folks flies right out of the window. That's just the start, though. What happens apparently during a pandemic is you have a jail population that's living in basically on top of each other, literally. They're eating non-nutritious food. They're getting little exercise. They're even getting less competent medical care, so that the jail becomes this viral petri dish of death. Sounds like a science fiction story, but it's true. That's what happens. And people in jails and prisons have experienced infection rates that are at least 1,000% higher than the general population of people living in the state that they're in. And the mortality rate is off the charts. Now, let's just keep in mind, many of these men and women who are locked up because they couldn't make bail and have been stuffed into a cage waiting for their day in court, they haven't been proven guilty of anything. As far as the courts are concerned, they are innocent and proven guilty, right? They haven't been proven guilty of anything. There's a concept, beyond that, there's a concept in our culture and in law, and Ricky, you read about it extensively, that says the punishment should fit the crime. As a matter of fact, the Constitution forbids what they call cruel and unusual punishment. That means we as a culture, we as a country, we don't slice off somebody's arm when they're found guilty of shoplifting. We don't sentence them to 30 years in prison for getting caught smoking a joint in public. And yet, in the United States, people are frequently being punished with de facto life sentences as they languish their life away in jail, watching as their fellow inmates are being carried off in stretchers and knowing that they could be the next unlucky one. Now, it's true, we've made a lot of progress in our country in general getting people vaccinated. And maybe the worst is over for most of us who are here, who aren't incarcerated. But very, very few people in jail or prison have received their vaccinations. And for them, the pandemic is very real and it hasn't slowed down at all. Out of desperation, this is very recent, inmates in a St. Louis jail rioted. And as it was reported in The Guardian, within the rioting, they started fires, they smashed windows, they chanted slogans. And one person created a sign on a sheet. And this guy was able to hang the sign outside the window, outside the barred window. And the sign, it wasn't a demand. It wasn't about politics. It was just one person expressing what his fears were. And his fears were that he would never, ever see his friends and family again because of the conditions there and because of the virus that was raging through the prison. His sign read very simply, "Please help." That's what it said. Simply, "Please help." That's what we've got to do. We've got to help. That's my rant. I'm sticking to it. All right. Ricky, you are involved right now with some very important work, and I know it's important to you. Can you tell us what you're up to now?
Right now, my main venture right now is the cannabis industry. I won a social equity license here in Los Angeles, so I was granted a marijuana license to run a dispensary. We were able to go and petition the city and the state to allow convicted felons to participate in the marijuana business because we're the ones that made marijuana be acceptable the way it is today. At one time it was considered illegal, and the people who went to prison for it paid a price in order for the people who are now handling all the licenses to be in the position that they're in. So we were able to accomplish that. I am very, very excited about the marijuana industry because the cash is there to do the things that I used to sell cocaine to do. And the only reason I sold cocaine is because I had no other way of financing my business. I wanted to be in business as well as anybody else. And I didn't have a rich uncle, rich auntie, a brother, or anybody that was going to come and loan me the money to start my business. So I needed a way to finance my business, and I turned to cocaine. Now, we have the benefit of having marijuana as a source of doing the same thing. I'm also I'm pushing my books, both of them.
Can you share their names for everybody?
My first book is called the Authorized Autobiography by Freeway Ricky Ross. The second one is the 21 Keys of Success. It's sold out right now, but it'll be back in print in about another month. I should have that back up and running. I'm also doing boxing right now. I go around and speak as often as I could. I'm glad that we opened it back up, so I'll be going again. I just got a call yesterday where I'll be allowed to go here to juvenile hall, 2 different juvenile halls, and speak to the kids and show them the way that I was able to take my time in prison and better myself and show them that they can do the same thing. I started to look at my prison cell as a dorm room of a college, and I said that I should work it as if it was a dorm room instead of it being a prison. And I think that if other people knew that they could do the same thing, they would start to put those same type of things into motion. So that's kind of
You're busy. You're a busy man, that's for sure. Your story and your reputation precedes you. That's how I started talking about you, and you don't disappoint. You deliver. Your book is 21 Secrets to Success. I think you said. What is the number one secret to success?
I guess the number one secret to success would be to believe in yourself. You have to give yourself a chance. If you don't give yourself a chance, nobody else will. If you can't do that, you can't do any of the other secrets. So I would say believing in yourself and to give yourself a chance. A lot of times we beat up on ourselves harder than anybody else, and that comes sometimes from your family members beating up on you. Telling, boy, you dreaming, you can't do that, stop it. And we start to buy into their beliefs and the way they see not just you, but the way they see themselves. Because I found out if you don't want it, you can't have it. So first thing I would say is believe in yourself and go for your dreams.
Go for your dreams. That's words to live by. Byron, I know you're here, and as well as other folks. And when we're done, we're going to keep the room open. And if Ricky has the time, we'd love him to stick around and answer a few more questions if he'd like. But that's going to be his call. But that is it for this week's installment of The Yard. And for all of us who are leaving the yard, we're the lucky ones because a lot of people are not leaving. Next week, we have something really incredible. A woman who's going to be joining us who's just amazing. Her name is Sabrina Smith. Back in 1989, Sabrina was found guilty of murdering her infant child, and she was sentenced to death. Except it turns out that, number one, the prosecution broke every rule in the book when they made the case against her. And number two, it turns out Sabrina was actually innocent. She didn't murder her child at all. She was a woman who was sent away to prison on death row, while at the same time she was grieving for the loss of her baby. It's an almost unspeakable, unthinkable thing that she went through, but she'll be joining us and telling us what that was all about. She works very hard right now to bring attention to this barbaric practice of, in our country of executing people found guilty of crimes. For those of you who are following this sort of thing, our past President Trump was a major advocate, and he cranked up in the federal system the use of executions, and it sort of caught on with a number of states now that are jumping on the bandwagon, unfortunately. We're not going to be on Clubhouse next time, but we will be in our Zoom channel. If you go to theyard.co, that's THA yard.co, you can put your name on the guest list, and as always, it's free to join us on The Yard. It'll be next Thursday again from 5 to 6:30 Pacific time. If you or someone else you think would be a great guest for The Yard, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact Adrienne. Her email is Adrienne, ADRIENNE, at commissary.club, or you'll see other contact, or you can just connect with her through her profile here on Clubhouse. The only qualification that we'd look for is that you've done time on The Yard before that you can talk about. We will be coming out with a brand new mobile-only app for Commissary Club within the next week or so. I'm telling you, it's really swell, and we're very, very excited. And we introduced it sort of in an alpha state, and the response was just completely way beyond our expectations. So, our goal is to create or foster a community so that all of us with records, can sort of become not second-class citizens anymore and not be marginalized anymore. And that's, we feel like we're on the front lines of that. To that end, we right now have a crowdfunding campaign that's going on Republic. And if you believe in the work we're doing, which is to say helping deserving men and women find jobs and creating community, please consider getting involved in investing. We are after double bottom line returns, which means do massive social good, make a lot of money doing it. We think that our company is worth a lot of money and that investors in it will be rewarded handsomely. So go to republic.co/commissary-club and you can read more about us. Please follow us. Please follow each and every one of us so that we can stay in touch with you and tell your friends about the yard. We are all, speaking for myself and Seth and Divine and Adrian, we are very, very humbled that we have the chance to serve folks who we have gotten to know, thousands of them, and these people are nothing short of heroes. Who among us hasn't made a mistake? Who among us hasn't asked for a second chance? I certainly know that I have. If you've got a record, please help everybody you know who's got a record in any way you can. And let's all celebrate our common humanity like they do every day on the yard. Folks, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great night. Stay safe. And if you'd like to stick around, please do. Have a good night.